There's some big changes coming to Illuvium Arena, probably sooner than you think, and I'll run through a couple of things that devs have said and why these changes are happening and what they might be. And I'll use the recent Wildfire tournament on the weekend as an example of why they're making these changes and what they might look like. So the devs have been receiving feedback since before the open beta got released, and these are some of the changes that they think are probably the biggest issues that they need to work on. The need for more dynamic gameplay progression, and I'll show you an example of that in the recent tournament, what dynamic gameplay progression might be and how it can be considered quite static. And static probably is also referring to the gameplay outcomes decided often by the deck matchup. And this has been maybe one of the biggest complaints. So often once the meta is considered kind of worked out, it's more about which team you bring, and at the other team it might be an auto loss for them or you. This isn't completely true, but it's probably too tuned in that favor and not enough dynamic gameplay or kind of variability once you enter the game. The other issue is lack of critical information, which is kind of, it's not a huge issue, but it is something that should be addressed. One of the biggest questions I get, what does grit and resolve do? So there's certain mechanics within the game or stats that are just not even explained, and you have to kind of search for it elsewhere. Let's focus on this static and dynamic gameplay and the outcomes decided by the matchups. In this recent tournament, I had my brother playing because if you're wondering why I didn't play, it's because I work every Saturday. The tournaments are every Saturday. I had my brother playing and he ended up getting second, and I've been playing with him for the last probably 2 or 3 weeks. He did play a little bit before that. He prefers to play TFT because it's obviously on at full release, and he is a challenger. Well, we're both challenger players in TFT, so he does have some level of skill and knowledge of auto battlers, and he obviously has me coaching him over the last 3 weeks. So I was able to talk to him a bit throughout this competition. My main advice was to play Mud Mystic, and then if the team was to play Bloom Arcanite, switch to Invoker or Tsunami to counter those teams, because it was the best of 3. And that's one example of how it's probably a little bit too tuned to deck selection, because we kind of know what decks counter each other, and there may not be enough variance within the game to kind of give you a path to winning against an unfavorable matchup. There still is, definitely, and I'll give you one example here of in this game against Smartass. This is an unfavorable matchup, so Mud Mystic usually loses this. This is an example of where I was able to, it was pretty crucial giving advice to my brother here. The bidding round for legendary augments is probably the latest thing that you learn, because it takes a lot of experience of even seeing these certain legendary augments come up in certain situations. And I knew this particular one on the Gorilla here that gives 150 HP, and he does extra physical damage every auto attack as a percentage of max HP. Is very good. So I said, get this one and put it on your Gorilla. He ended up putting it on the Gorilla round 1, which I didn't, that's not what I meant, but he put it on him round 1, an opener with Gorilla and the legendary augment, and he ended up beating Smartass, who's probably one of the, could be easily considered the best player at the moment because he's won the most tournaments, and we're in an unfavorable matchup against, let's just call him the best player, and we're still able to win. So I point this out because it's not just pure deck selection, there is variance in the game, but the game does need more of this added, and the devs obviously agree with this. So in this case, the legendary augment did win this matchup, and the Gorilla was the MVP for my brother here, and we were able to win this one. Another example of the game somewhat considered predetermined, but maybe not as quiet as what people think, is everyone was playing Arcanite like I've already mentioned, and my advice to my brother was bring Invoker into Arcanite if you can. And right here this works. My brother beats Protozea here using Invoker into Arcanite, and we thought this is great. My brother thought I was a genius with the advice I was giving him, but then in the finals he actually versus the same matchup, we get the same matchup, we got both Tsunami and Invoker into Lowilo's Arcanite Bloom here, which pretty much everyone in the tournament was playing Arcanite Bloom except for my brother, and Lowilo was actually able to beat this matchup in the finals, despite us thinking that this was a free win. So I only point this out to say that the game isn't as predetermined as maybe what we all think, although it is definitely probably too far tuned to that side and not as dynamic or not as much variance within each round. And there's plenty of ideas that people have put forward, and the game devs are already aware of all of these, of how you could change this. You're just adding a little bit of RNG somewhere. You could do a round robin, so a 4, and so you play a different player each round, and you either get a first, second, third, or fourth. You could have a ban system. You could have a dynamic mastery points each round instead of the set mastery points. It's different each round and it's randomized. You could be guaranteed a legendary augment each rather than bidding against each other. So it'd be more frequent that the legendary augments makes a big difference to the game rather than only if you both don't pick the same things. So all these things will add variables that will make it not as easy to know exactly what the best team is. And even if you have an unfavorable matchup, there is still this path to either outplaying them or some kind of RNG working in your favor. So Ben here says they've already had significant improvements planned even before PvP was released, and at the moment he believes that there's probably only maybe 50 to 60% of what they had planned. So they've recognized the issues, and if we look at what Aaron has said here, they're working on a number of changes for Arena, and there is a range of options that they're considering implementing already. This could even mean that they might release two versions in the next big patch. That way the community can kind of test both of them. One of these will be a light touch, so some of the things maybe already mentioned, whereas the other would be a bit more heavy-handed. And he even said there's a longer term future state that wouldn't be available for open beta that they're excited about. So maybe there's 3 versions they're considering, but the point here is that pretty soon there'll be other versions of the game. We'll address some of the things that we've mentioned. I think the game is in a pretty good state. The foundations are really good. The mechanics, the items, everything within the game is amazing. The artwork is obviously insane. And I think even the light touches go a long way to making this 10 times better. So we can expect maybe in a couple of weeks, whenever the next big patch launches, or maybe even next week when a patch launches, there might be some light touches, and there may be a bigger change coming pretty soon as well. Let me know what you think down below, and if you appreciated the video, make sure to like and subscribe.